So we're going to move on to another conversation, same subject area, economic development. I want to welcome Senator John Damoose, who actually represents Mackinac Island, as well as Senator Mallory McMorrow from Oakland County. They have been working together closely over the course of the last session to put together a package of bills that will provide guidelines for how Michiganders are going to get their economic development strategy going in the future. So, Jerome, senators, thank you for being here.
Yes, thank you both very much. I don't want to talk about economic development. I want to talk about the weather. And so let's jump, right in. First of all, from each of you, tell me, do you think the state is on the right track when it comes to economic development?
Well, that's an interesting question. I mean, I think we need to be working hard on economic development. I think we've lost our way a little bit. That on both sides of the aisle seem to have different concerns about economic development, but both of them have concerns. On the one side, I think Senator McMorrow could speak to the Democratic side, but I've heard a lot of things that really concern me on the Republican side about calling anything we happen to do corporate welfare and these type of things. When, in fact, Michigan has a problem around the country with a perception problem, and we're going to have to spend some money to bring some of these corporations back to Michigan.
What sorts of things are you hearing perception-wise? What misconceptions are out there?
Well, I'll tell you what, I ran a business for 25 years, headquartered here in Michigan, but most of our clients were always in the Washington, D.C. area or Florida or different parts of the country. And I can tell you that almost everywhere I went, they'd see me wearing my Detroit Tigers cap and say, "What are you doing in Michigan?" They've watched for decades about the old Rust Belt state and our supposedly dying automobile industry, which is thriving, by the way. But they see that, they see us, they see crime statistics and news stories and all these headlines that have turned them away from Michigan, and they don't really understand what an incredible place it is to live. And then we've had, sadly, a bad corporate tax income structure for years and years and years that drove companies out. We've had a lot of laws that made it hard for businesses to do their operations here in Michigan. We need to overcome that.
What's it going to take to do that? And I'm going to ask you the same questions, but what is it going to take to get that straightened out?
Well, I'll tell you, I think it goes down to a package that Senator McMorrow and I are working together on, which is developing a 10-year economic development plan. Because nothing is going to work if everything we do is a bunch of one-offs. And we both serve on the Senate Appropriations Committee, and I got to tell you that I get tired of people coming in and we got this project, we got this project, we got this project, and there's no seeming strategy, there's no stick-to-itiveness. I was in the film industry and I saw what happens when there's not a long-term vision. Because in 2008, that time frame, we started our film incentives. Georgia had film incentives that they remodeled to follow Michigan. And I'm not even arguing in favor or against film incentives, forget what it is. But you knew darn well there was no commitment within the state of Michigan to stick with these things. There was talk the day they came out that they were going to be reversed. So it bred in the industry this mindset of get in, get your money, and get out. Georgia stuck with it. And today, Georgia is one of the best places on earth to produce films and television. And we want to come up, I don't think it's films, but whatever the industry is, we need to come together, coalesce around a plan that we stick to as a state.
What's this word, plan? Well, explain that word to me.
A plan. It is, what a concept, right? Having a plan. Michigan is a state that I think as we look at the economic development strategies, and I say strategies plural because it feels like it changes with every administration, whether it's automotive or, autonomous vehicles or investing in the film incentives that we then took away, there isn't any consistency. And what has happened is we've allowed ourselves as a state to be lapped by many other states who have stopped the rat race of going after every single project, competing with every single state, overpaying for projects that may or may not make sense for your unique state. So what we're proposing in a comprehensive 10-year plan is exactly that. It's answering the question, who do we want to be when we grow up? We had Doug Song, who was the founder of Duo Securities, in front of my committee a couple of years ago, and he said something that sticks with me. He says, Michigan has a really good understanding of what we've done. We have a hard time imagining or getting comfortable with what's next. So we're scrambling to try to figure that out at the expense of taking the time to assess who are we, What is our unique advantage versus other states? What are our core competencies? What are our assets? What do our residents want to do that is going to lead to a place where they have careers that they can thrive in and that is going to make Michigan be prosperous? In the 1980s, 5 of the top 10 metro regions in the entire country for median household income were Michigan. Today, none of the top 10 are. And if we do not center economic development with a plan that is solely focused on increasing prosperity for residents, we're going to keep falling behind.
So let me ask, you look at states that are on the top of the economic development list, Utah, Washington. What do they have that we don't have?
So something that both of those states have done that I think is a really unique approach that's really only happened over the last 10, 20 years is understanding that we have to flip the issue on its head. Previously, talent would go to where the jobs are. These days, with a younger generation, jobs are going to where talent is, and they're paying a premium to do so. So you look at both of the states that you mentioned, they are really focused on investing in something that we've considered in some of the economic development reform we've tried to do, which is not only just jobs, but it's place, it's transportation, it's investing in walkable downtowns, access to housing. Those are the types of things that attract talent, where talent is going to locate in a state where they know, particularly as a millennial, younger generations, we don't have the same job security that our parents did. So you want to know that if you take a job and for whatever reason that job goes away, you get laid off, they downsize, that you have another 3, 4, 5 career opportunities, and you're not going to be left stranded in case something happens.
So the two of you are working together on this. The state, in your minds, needs this sort of cooperation. How did you manage to get together on this? Because, there's so much partisanship going on so many different issues. Is the situation so critical, so dire in Michigan that was the only way that the two of you got together on it? Or do you see common threads? Did you see common threads?
Well, I think there's absolutely common threads. We don't need to be at each other's throats all the time. And the fact is, there's maybe 5 or 6 issues that are really divisive. But I think responsible legislators who want to do actually good things for the state can come together around important things. I'm sure, I don't know what drove Senator McMorrow into this, but I think it was similar, that we just saw there's no rhyme or reason to this stuff. And we watch a state that swings back and forth. I'll tell you what, one thing that really sealed the deal is I supported this Ford Motor Company battery plant. And I've told people this before that, people have questions about electric vehicles or whatever. I've told people they could have been making fairy dust, and I would have supported that plant because this is our hometown team, and I'm sick of watching them relocate to other parts of the country. And you know what they said to me afterwards, and I don't know if this is still true, I probably shouldn't even be attributing it to them, but they said, John, if we didn't get this program, we're never building anything in the state of Michigan again. And I said, why? I mean, that's scary to hear as a state legislator. I said, because you swing back and forth every new administration. We never know if you're going to love us or if you're going to hate us. And you swing back and forth. We go to places like Tennessee, and they're thrilled to have us there. They want the jobs we provide. They roll out the red carpet and do everything they can to keep us there. And that's what drove me to do it. And then when I saw that Senator McMorrow had a heart for this, and we both started talking, and I realized also that we don't know who we are as a state anymore. I mean, I grew up here, and in the 80s, and before that, everybody knew what Michigan was. We made great things, and we played outside all year long. That, like, anybody could point to that. That's what Michigan is. We really don't have that long-term vision right now of what are we? Are we still a great manufacturing state? Do we want to be that, or do we want to go to just the knowledge economy, or do we want to think we can be the next Silicon Valley, which the world doesn't really need another Silicon Valley? But we realize, at least for me, and I think it was similar with Senator McMorrow, was we saw this disjointed approach to things, saw the risks to our corporations, and said, we've got to do something to act. And now, I have no doubt that the two of us would probably have a radically different, or at least a different view of what that economy should look like, but we're in unison that we need to have a plan.
But I think John points to an important point in that there were some shared frustrations. When we would take votes in the Appropriations Committee to transfer taxpayer dollars to some of these projects, and then we look at some of the headlines that show that we're spending millions, billions of dollars on economic development, and yet our median household income is declining. that our population has stagnated, that we have more residents getting set to retire than we have younger workers coming into the workforce. I know when we were up in northern Michigan, at that panel, you pointed out, yeah, a lot of people up here think this is just a tourism destination. And for younger people, what is the reason to stay and start a career and buy a house and start a family? There were shared frustrations. And I think what's really thoughtful about our legislation is we know we would likely come to different solutions, which is why we wrote legislation that says it's not on us. We are going to create a panel that exists for 1 year with experts from regions all across the state, from education, from economic development, entrepreneurship, small business ownership, manufacturing, to say this is on you. You guys write a plan that we will then use in the legislature as our North Star. Because when I talk to colleagues on both sides of the aisle, I think the frustration is most legislators understand we need to be pushing economic development. There are some on both sides of the aisle who just think economic development should never be done. But for the rest of us, we just want to know why. What is the direction? What is the rationale? What is the strategy? What's the plan so that we can feel good as the stewards of taxpayer dollars that we're spending them wisely?
What are some of the things that, the panel is going to look at, think about how to figure out what that North Star is? I mean, you sort of mentioned, introspection and what communities want. What's it going to take to just figure out what that North Star should be?
So we held a series of roundtable discussions all across the state. We started in Traverse City, we held another one in Detroit, and we held a third one in the Holland area to bring together kind of the first draft of who these individuals would be, to just have the conversation. And we heard a few things loud and clear. Number one, that people across the state look at the results of the Growing Michigan Together Council report and agree that population growth, household income growth, and entrepreneurship should be anchors for each region, but that how you get there is the question that hasn't been answered, and that is going to look very different in northern Michigan, in the Upper Peninsula, in the Thumb, in southeast Michigan, in West Michigan. So we need a plan that has flexibility to get there. We also know that we have to center prosperity as the metric for success. Jobs created is an outdated metric. We have more job openings in Michigan than we have people to fill them right now. So if you're not actually improving people's lives, are you succeeding? So starting from that framework, I think giving this group of people the task of sort of answering that question of, okay, how do we get there? That we can then use as a tool, not only to understand what projects to say yes to, but probably more importantly, what ones to say no to, so that you can really hone in on who do we want to be when we grow up, how are we supporting Michigan and Michiganders in a thoughtful way.
So are you sending spies to Utah to get intel? What?
You kind of are, aren't you?
Yeah. So my legislative director went on a tour to a number of different states with some economic development leaders from Michigan to do exactly that, to figure out what are other states doing right, what are they doing wrong, what can we learn from. And I think a really good example, not for us to model their plan, but I look at a state like Virginia. Virginia, under Governor McAuliffe years ago, understood that there was frustrations with economic development and there was a legislative push for reform that is now being executed under Governor Youngkin. And for a state like Michigan, when we talk about the inconsistencies, we are one of few states that it is very likely that the control of power will change from one administration to the other. We have to prepare to have a plan that withstands political changes. And I think Virginia is a really smart state to learn from.
Yeah, and the only way you get there, too, we've built into this a really localized feature here. I mean, because we are really multiple states within one state. We're all impacted by certain things, but we have unique dynamics. For instance, up here in northern Michigan, here in my district right now, one of the top driving forces for me and for everybody up here is how do we create a year-round economy so that our kids don't all grow up and leave us, because we miss our kids, frankly. And that involves, we love tourism. We're glad tourism's here. It's a huge part of our economy, but this means getting into things like small to medium-sized manufacturing, which is perfect. We've got great shipping with our access to the lakes. That's appropriate. How do we leverage things like the great universities we have down at University of Michigan and Michigan State and all these great universities? Maybe that's a certain different part of our economy. Where's our skill set in Detroit? And so I think that's part of what we have to do is make it customized. You can learn from other states as to the types of things that have worked, but we really need to hone into those regional differences and make sure we have something that works for everybody.
We don't have the North Star yet, but no doubt whatever it is, technology is going to be playing a role in it here or there. What more do we need to do on the education front to make sure that your kids, my kids, are ready for those jobs?
Well, that's a big one, which we talk about all the time. And I think the policy is starting to catch up a little bit with more CTE education and these type of things. And this is something, 15 years ago, I had started an organization with a man from the Center for Automotive Research, because he foresaw this giant cliff we were going to have in terms of manufacturing workforce. Whereas people considered this sort of dirty, dark, dangerous, dead-end jobs of before. They'd seen all the black and white images, and they don't realize what advanced manufacturing is. And we don't have the workforce, and yet we have this system where we just knee-jerk send all our kids to four-year colleges. I think that perception's changing. So this is an area with what you're talking about where I actually think we're going to start to see progress. There's great schools, there's great funding coming up for our community colleges with Michigan Reconnect and some of these other things. So we're not going to immediately see the difference, but this is certainly on everybody's radar. I think we're heading in the right direction.
This panel can really direct how do we rethink education and workforce development. There's a real silver lining in the state of Michigan on certified apprenticeships, where there are some really non-traditional apprenticeships in things like beekeeping, winemaking, agriculture, agritech, where I think for millennials, Gen Z, and Gen Alpha, the generation after that, there's more flexibility to be able to pivot your career if you get down a path and realize maybe the jobs aren't here. I mean, thinking about the advent of AI, and for a lot of white-collar workers, how quickly a lot of those jobs that we thought, software engineers, that was going to be your ticket to success. In 5-10 years, that may not be it anymore. So if you don't have to go back to school for another 4-year degree, maybe you could take on a certified apprenticeship and find out you love beekeeping, and that's your new career.
All right.
That's probably a pretty niche market.
But
we haven't spelled that out in the plan.
There's that one person who's going to find it and realize this is what I've been waiting for.
Mallory's got a whole paragraph in our bill about beekeeping. I always wondered why. So.
All right. Thank you very much, Senator John Damoose,
Yeah, great to be with you.
Senator Mallory McMorrow.
Thank you so
much, and I look forward to talking to you more.
Yeah.